You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
We had an idea that we could turn what was a high-grade underground mine into an open pit. This open pit is right on the rail, right on the road, access to power. And so we saw that in the data, but the data isn't always real. So back in 2019, we drill tested it. We put 3,500 meters into the ground. It returned 13 holes over 100 meters of ore grade copper right near surface in an open pit. We had 2.5% copper over 75 meters was my personal favorite hole. My second favorite hole was 1% copper over 160 meters. And that's right at surface. Literally, that was 3 meters down hole. And so that means open pit. So that all goes to say, we've already found this deposit. Now our next task is delineating it. So systematically drilling it out and proving to the market.
Welcome back to Mining Stock Education. I'm your host, Bill Powers. Well, we will be doing a new company profile interview today, and it's QC Copper and Gold. QC Copper and Gold is part of the OR Group, which is led by Stewart. The OR Group is a sponsor of Mining Stock Education, and we've profiled two companies within this group, Baselode Energy, as well as Ore Finders in the past few months. So this is the third company in the group. Stewart is at the helm of this company, as well as being at the helm of Ore Finders. So Stephen, welcome back onto Mining Stock Education, and thank you for joining me again.
Bill, it's great to be here. Of course, we're a proud sponsor, a big fan of your show. I listen to every episode.
Yes, thank you. Well, let's start off with the beginning. What is the history of QC Copper? And as a manager and CEO of this company, how did you access your shares?
Well, as a manager, how did I access my shares? Let's start there. I bought every single share cash, either on the market or in a private placement. Zero free shares in this company, and the same holds true for every company that me and my group are involved with. So our interests are aligned with shareholders first and foremost. I think that's critical. How we acquired the Opemiska project, which is QC's flagship, and how QC came to be. It was a spin-off of Ore Finders Resources, which is another company we spoke about before. That happened in 2018, where we dividended out our shares in what was then a private company and gave a distribution to Ore Finders shareholders. So they got free shares in QC. I'll note that QC used to be, at the time, was called Power Ore. It had a different asset. But ultimately, we created this brand new listing on the Toronto Venture Exchange as a vehicle to acquire what's called the Opemiska Copper Mine Complex, which is the former Falconbridge world-class mine that produced 1.4 billion pounds of copper, nearly 1 million ounces of gold in the Chibougamau district of Quebec. And so that is our focus now, and we're ready to go. We think that the time for copper is here.
Stephen, the listing on the TSXV is QCCU. Website is QCCopper.com for people to find more information. But I see that you don't really have the OTC listing up and running yet.
Not yet. That's a priority, I think, 2 weeks away, and we will have our full listing to give exposure for our U.S. investors, of which there are many.
Okay. When we talked about Ore Finders, obviously you are very bullish on gold, as am I. So because this is a copper-focused junior, let's hear your bullish thesis for copper, please.
Well, certainly, I'll mention I am a gold guy, and this has gold in it. Hence their name, QC, stands for Quebec, copper and gold. But it really is a copper-rich story. And my thesis about copper is it goes to the macro. Let's talk about the supply-demand aspects. When you look at the supply, where copper has come from historically to this day, the vast majority of it comes from Chile, Escondida, Chuqui. These are 70-year-old huge open pits that used to be mining 1.5 grams as recently as 10 years ago. Those grades have been halved. They're below 0.7 grams. They're still big deposits, but they're getting so expensive and old to operate, and eventually they're gonna run out. And so there's a real supply issue. There are a few really fantastic new copper deposits coming online, but investors will quickly find out those deposits are in really risky jurisdictions. So there's this lack of pipeline of quality copper in really good jurisdictions. Of course, we're in Quebec, which is I think, tier one across the board, place you want to be. So that's my supply argument for why we want to be in copper. And then, of course, you have to consider the demand. Copper is really the most versatile metal there is. It obviously behaves very differently from gold. It's really an industrial metal. It is the industrial metal. People call it Dr. Copper because, or excuse me, Dr. Copper because it correlates with the economy. And so if the economy is doing well, copper is doing well. Now, is the economy going to be doing well in the next 12 to 24 months? Well, I mean, there's a huge unknown with COVID and, of course, the election going on. But ultimately, I think it comes down to infrastructure. So even if Main Street isn't doing well, what I think is going to happen is, in order to get us out of this debt quagmire, meaning the massive amount of money printing that's going on in the United States and across the world. It's not just the United States, it's everywhere. In order for us to get out of that and resolve ourselves and get back to productivity, okay, not just free money, but productivity, we're going to have to build the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the highways, the ports, buildings, you name it, a new deal of sorts. In fact, I think it's probably going to be called the Marshall Plan Part 2, not to get sort of doom and gloom about it, but I think that the United States and the Americas as a whole really needs to focus on infrastructure, and copper is a major, major input for all of these things. And then, of course, we can take it to the next level and amplify the demand expectations from copper for this EV expectation. It doesn't go into the battery, but what it does, it connects point A from point B. So if it has an on or an off switch, it's got copper. So we really think that copper has a very, very bright future. It has struggled over the past 2 years, largely because of the trade war, and then COVID took it down to $2 earlier in March, but it's rallied. And the Chinese are just consuming it voraciously. I can't get enough of it because they're in recovery mode. They're trying to eat the lunch of the West, so to speak, and they're building. And they're buying as much raw copper as they can. They've driven the price up to $3.15 this week. But what we haven't seen is the junior exploration companies like QC Copper really react. Okay, so the guys that are producing the copper, they see that extra dollar of margin flow to their bottom line instantly. And the Freeports of the world have performed great. Look at their stock chart. But there is a lag when it comes to the exploration companies like QC Copper. It takes a while for that benefit to trickle down to us. Really, it's about interest. As we do not produce it, we look for it. But as Freeport gains in momentum and share price, people make money, then they start to think about, well, where are they going to replenish their supply? And they start to look up the supply chain, and then slowly they'll look at us. And the exact same setup. So this, what I call the junior exploration lag, it takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months. We saw it with gold. Exact same setup happened. It's already happening with copper. We're seeing, I mean, QC's up, not insubstantially over the last few months. Our contemporaries are doing the same thing. But really what you hear is the narrative. I mean, just listen to what people are saying. Guys like yourself, people on TV, copper really is coming into the forefront, and that just drives sentiment, which is so powerful in this industry.
You're an early stage exploration company seeking to discover and develop a copper deposit in Quebec. That's what the QC stands for. But when I look at a junior, I always try to assess what's the fundamental valuation relative to the market cap. So can you talk to us about your cash, securities, and your known resource relative to your current market cap, please?
Well, absolutely. Let me make a quick point. We found this deposit. It's right there. And in fact, before I get into our balance sheet, which I think your listeners are going to be excited to hear about, this deposit used to be a high-grade vein type deposit. Okay, so they were mining underground. And Falconbridge, who is now Glencore, were producing out of there for 50 years. And they had a phenomenal database, which we acquired, digitized, and we saw something. We had a new idea, and that was that the copper existed outside of these veins. So it's what's called a disseminated deposit. And the real kicker was that this all happens close to surface. So we had an idea that we could turn what was a high-grade underground mine into an open pit. This open pit is right on the rail, right on the road, access to power. And so we saw that in the data, but the data isn't always real. So back in 2019, we drill tested it. We put 3,500 meters into the ground. It returned 13 holes over 100 meters of ore grade copper right near surface in an open pit. We had 2.5% copper over 75 meters was my personal favorite hole. My second favorite hole was 1% copper over 160 meters. And that's right at surface. Literally, that was 3 meters down hole. And so that means open pit. So that all goes to say we've already found this deposit. Now our next task is delineating it. So systematically drilling it out and proving to the market and to everybody that this is X tons at Y grade with Z strip ratio. That is our objective right now. And we're going to get to that in Q1. We're just start coming out with a 20,000 meter drill campaign that will put on the full first maiden 43101 resource. We're obviously going to utilize the Falcon Bridge data and leverage that in this 20,000 meter program as well. And then we'll put economics on it. Everybody wants to see how big is this? What's the NPV? What's the IRR? Does this make sense? We think it does. Our goal, a forward-looking statement is we think we can take this to the 100 million ton range at 1% copper. If we do that, okay, that's, you do the math, that's 1 million tons of copper. Copper's trading right now at around $7,000 per ton. That's $7 billion in gross metal. Doesn't mean that's what it's worth. Obviously, you got to build, you got to extract, you have operating costs, but that's a great top line to aim for. That's our objective. We'll see if we get there.
Yep.
To answer your, sorry, Bill, to answer your question, you had the other part of your question was, of course, our cash and our balance sheet. What does that look like? First, I'll state that we are a $10 million market cap company. We barely exist. So the opportunity for investors to get at, close to the ground floor is here, I would say. If you're looking for a junior that has not run, take a look at QC Copper and Gold. That's what I would say. In terms of where our working capital situation is, we have approximately $1.8 million in cash. So we've got cash. We're not rich, but we've got cash to operate. And what we do have, what I think is unique, is that we have about almost $8 million in shares of another company called Baselode Energy. You mentioned, you talked to Baselode CEO James Sykes. QC Copper vended off about 6-7 months ago, vended a non-core asset. Okay, so this has nothing to do with our Opemiska. It wasn't our focus. We were paying no attention to it. We sold it to Baselode for what was about $1 million valuation. We've turned that into about $8 million in Baselode. That speaks to the corporate level transactions that our group has become quite well known for. And so, that is not cash, of course. But those are real shares. Baselode is led by a fantastic guy, and if he's successful in his thesis, and Baselode's got about $3.5 million of cash, and it's going to be drilling in December. If that's successful, well, that 8 million could turn into, who knows? I won't make any prognostications, but we're going to sit tight and see what happens with James. So if you add those two figures together, basically our working capital brings our EV to zero. So that means you're getting this project for nothing. What I think is perhaps one of the most interesting copper and gold exploration plays in a mature district like Chibougamau, Quebec, you can invest in at a virtual zero enterprise value with QC Copper and Gold today.
That 1.8 million Canadian, how far will that take you with the plans of drilling and the economic study?
Well, if you drill with 100 meters, $100 a meter is really the sort of back of the envelope there. That will not take us to the full 20,000 meters. Okay, so 20,000 meters at $100, that's $2 million. So we're a little bit shortfall there. So investors can expect us to take in capital at some point in the future. We raised $1 million about 5-6 months ago. The whole purpose of that was to give me patience. Okay, I believe in timing, and timing is so important in the juniors. So we don't like to force anything. Hence, we haven't been, in the last year, we haven't been drilling because copper's been out of vogue. Okay, so I want to be drilling when copper is in vogue, and we're just at the cusp. So our share price is getting up. I'm sensitive to our cost of capital. When it's appropriate, investors can expect us to go and dip a toe into the market, finance us completely up to the level that we can execute our 20,000 meter drill program. And then, of course, we have all sorts of other optionality plays, including things like Baselode that may or may not come into play. But I think that it's important to note that our group, you mentioned the OR group, we've raised close to $20 million over the last 6 or 7 months. Clearly, we have access to capital. There's a ton of interest in QC. So the money is there when we want it. It's just a question of timing and at what cost.
Stephen, this isn't a massive porphyry deposit in Chile or Peru, but 100 million tons at 1% copper is nothing to sneeze at. Talk to us about what type of company would buy such a project, because that's your exit strategy, is ultimately to sell this project.
That's the best way for any junior company and its investors to make money, if you want my opinion, is to sell. Guys such as myself and many of my contemporaries, although there are exceptions, have never built a mine. And so I think that's the best way to execute. So ultimately, that is my goal, is to de-risk and delineate and de-risk something that it becomes attractive to probably a mid-tier producer. I'd never like to shut any doors, but you're right. It's not a porphyry deposit, which would be attractive to a mega major like a Rio Tinto or a BHP. But you know what? I don't want to be a porphyry deposit. Porphyry deposit, maybe you can get 1 billion tons of ore in a copper deposit, which is nice, but their grades are 0.3, okay? And then they come along and they take forever to drill out. They're super high risk. The capital required to drill out a porphyry is just so high. And then when it comes time to build it, you're looking at $1, $2, $3, $5 billion. That's not what we are. That's not what we want to be. We're a nice small, small is not the right word, but we're a nice tight package. We've got high grades. Okay, so grade is king. We think that our grades stand up to nearly anybody in the copper space. And then of course, I think the bonus is when we have delineated our open pit and defined our tons in grade, we've got the infrastructure there. Okay. Literally, the CN Railway comes right to our property. There's a 100, if not $1 billion line item that is not required to be built. We've got a paved highway running through the property. We've got an airport 15 minutes away, power to site. We've got a very sophisticated mining community, labor. That's very important. When we're drilling this, and before we start building anything, when we drill it, our drillers go home at night. There's no camps. Okay, so when I quoted 100 meters, $100 per meter to drill, that's where we are. If we didn't have these infrastructure advantages, you can be $200, $300, $500 a meter. So this project, given it's in a mature area of Chibougamau, has so many advantages, and that's what initially attracted us to this project. And I'll mention that, you know, above and beyond the Chibougamau district or our Opemiska project, which is really the anchor in the district, there are other deposits there. So that potentially, and I believe in consolidation, bigger is usually better in the mining industry. And so if a larger company, even somebody like a Rio or a BHP, wanted to come in there with an eye to consolidate, okay, so you could really pick up all sorts of deposits in and around the what's called the Gwillim Fault, which is the regional controlling mineralized structure. So, and that's how I see it. So I never like to count anybody out who could acquire us. I think all sorts of producers, small, big, and super big, will be interested in domestically produced copper, especially in light of what we've seen in the policy response to the COVID. I think everything's, in particularly the supply chain, is going to come a lot closer to home.
Stephen, one question about your involvement in QC. You're the CEO, but you're also involved in all of the other ore group companies, as well as ore finders. I'm very impressed with your entrepreneurial ambition, but then the question also comes up as an investor, is he spreading himself too thin? Could you please speak to this?
Sure. Well, no, I don't think I am. I think I give equal attention to all my children, so to speak, but the most important thing is the team. It's not just me running this. The other companies all have a key technical team behind it. Ore finders in Mustango, those are operating right now. I've largely handed the keys over to our technical team, Keith Ben, who's focused on executing our drill program. They want me nowhere near that drill program at this point in time. Trust me, I'm not a geologist. Same thing for QC Copper and Gold. The keys are in the hands of Charles Beaudry, who just put out a really great webinar yesterday, detailing the technical plan. Charles is the mastermind behind the geology. So the ore group really does have a team that I rely so heavily on. The primary tasks, what I bring to the table, are my ability, my network. Okay, so I raise the money. That is my primary responsibility. so that my team can go out and execute. And that's what Charles is going to do. He has a vision. Charles is the one that deserves the credit for identifying this disseminated feature that this deposit has. Very few deposits are actually disseminated, but it's not, we didn't invent the wheel either. This model has been very successfully executed, most famously with Osisko and their Malartic deposit, the exact same principle and not too far away. So Charles saw that same sort of potential and then came to me. We raised the money. I raised the money with him behind me to go and execute his thesis. We did that with our drill program to prove it's disseminated. Now we got to go finish the job.
Stephen, 1 year from now, a forward-looking statement, if you're successful with these plans you've laid out, what's the market cap going to be?
Well, I look at some of our peers who are $50, $100 million market cap. We're $10 million market cap. Okay, so I see companies that are trading 5 to 10 times us with a lesser asset, certainly lesser than the targets that I mentioned before. We certainly hope to meet those. If you go to our presentation, I think it's on slide 18, we list a lot of the comparables there. We're at the bottom of the list. We're sub $10 million market cap. And then we list a whole slew of companies going up to 50 million tons, and some of them are $500 million. Now that is a forward-looking statement. I'm not saying we're going to be a $500 million market cap, but maybe we are, maybe we won't. But there's quite a ladder for us to climb in terms of creating value for shareholders.
One follow-up question on Baselode. I am a Baselode shareholder, which I didn't disclose in my last interview with James Sykes, because after I produced the interview, I said I need a piece of this, so I did invest in the private placement. So as a Baselode shareholder, should I have any concern that you own 62% of the company, and how would you possibly unload those shares?
Well, no, I wouldn't be concerned at all. I wear two hats in the sense that I'm not looking to rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So QC is a long-term shareholder. We're not interested in liquidating $8 million worth of shares if we could. Okay, that's not all that liquid. That company is not all that liquid, certainly, to do that. We're in this for the big score. We take risk-adjusted bets. Okay, we bet on people, we bet on theses, on the commodity, and then we bet on a plan. I am not selling any my personal shares in Baselode, nor is QC Copper for the foreseeable future. I want to see, James has discovered, been a key member of 3 uranium deposits. He's 40 years old. I am betting that he's going to find a 4th, 5th, and 6th, and I'm going to hitch my wagon to him when he does and benefit financially, and I expect QC will do the same.
So the name is QC Copper and Gold, but it almost could be, as we speak, QC Copper, Gold, and Uranium, couldn't it?
With the uranium kicker, sure. Why not?
There you go. So you're getting exposure to, of course, copper and uranium. The website, again, is QCCopper.com. For Canadian investors or those that can invest internationally on the venture exchange in Toronto, you can find it under the ticker QCCU. And for U.S. investors, in the works is that OTC listing that you'll find very shortly. Stephen, as always, a great presentation, and I own 9% via or Finders owns 9% of QC Copper, we should mention, so I do have exposure to QC Copper and Gold. But thank you for this overview.
Fantastic, Bill. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Mining Stock Education. Please subscribe and share this show with like-minded investors. Connect with us at MiningStockEducation.com and sign up for our email list to stay in touch. Much success to you as you learn about, invest in, and profit from mining stocks.